Next, we're going to hear from our panelists, and I'm just going to work down the line, and I want to first introduce Greg LeRoy, who's Executive Director of Good Jobs First. Good Jobs First is a national resource center that promotes accountability and economic development and smart growth for working families. Greg's 25 years in that field, and has written a book recently that I just read when I came to this job, and I'm quite impressed with, and I would highly recommend to all of you, called Great American Job Scam, Corporate Tax Dodging and the Myth of Job Creation. And I'm hoping that Greg will talk a little bit about the idea of economic development and job creation and what we're actually getting for the public investment from the private sector. Greg LeRoy.
Thanks, Deborah, and good morning, everyone. I want to say kudos to the New Jersey Policy Perspective for doing this study. Tax increment finance is wonky, but it's kind of like your cod liver oil. You must do it, you must take it. Anybody serious about looking at economic development in this country today has to understand it, and especially at a moment like this when a state does radical surgery on a TIF program, you got to look at it. And I would say that New Jersey now rivals and probably surpasses New Mexico as having the most radically deregulated and potentially problematic TIF program of any state in the country. And in my travels around the country working on economic development, TIF is the most often recurring program that we get asked about and that people want help on. And sales tax increment financing, that is the diversion of sales tax, otherwise known as STIF, is the most problematic subset of TIF within TIF. And I want to focus on the stiff aspects of the New Jersey radical surgery this morning. Your new stiff options are off the charts because of the share or the size, the amount of sales tax revenue that's potentially able to be diverted. And here's why. So you have two different options now for sales tax diversion under your program. One is within what's called an urban enterprise zone, and one is without, but in all these other areas of the state that Sarah talked about. As things stand today right now, if you have a revenue allocation district in an urban enterprise zone, the whole rate that consumers pay is half. It's 3.5% instead of 7%, and that 3.5% goes to the local government for redevelopment benefits like those that were talked about in Millville. Under the new program, the post-ERG STIF, if you will, the rate snaps back to 7%, and all 7% of it can go to the developer. And even in a non-UEZ STIF, 75% of 7%, which is to say 5.25% of the sales tax, the whole enchilada, essentially the entire increment, 5.5%, of it can go to the developer. As a matter of national context, those numbers are off the charts. 7% is off the charts, 5% is off the charts. Rarely in those small number of states, about a dozen, that allow any sales tax to get TIF'd, the amount it's confined to the local share of the sales tax, which is typically around 1%, not 5%, not 7%. So you're talking about, quantum leap factors of, multiples of the norm in terms of the amount of sales tax that can get stiffed here. That's really significant. And as the report points out, you have 32 UEZs. In 28 of those UEZs, there's significant available acreage that could be developed as retail and then become eligible for this super 7% business. I think this is a giant structural incentive for retail overbuilding. And I predict that you're going to end up with problems of new retail development pirating sales tax from surrounding retailers. And this is a recurring tension in TIF in other states anyway, of Mall A getting pirated by Mall B after Mall B gets built with TIF and pirates sales tax activity away from Mall A. You have to understand, most retail markets in this country, including many of those in your state, are already oversaturated, right? There was a study years ago done by PricewaterhouseCoopers saying already at that point about 12% of the regional malls in this country were verging on so-called grayfield status, that's dead malls, malls that were getting converted to low end use or poorly boarded up or generating very low square footage retail rates. It boils down to this. You and I do not have more money to spend because we have more places to spend it. You don't grow an economy by building more retail space. Retail space, what happens is when people have disposable income. But we know that retail jobs are bad jobs, with the minor exception of the unionized grocery sector of retail. The overwhelming majority of retail jobs are poverty wage, part-time, no health care. We know from states that have disclosed their companies that have the greatest number of employees on Medicaid and S-chip, Walmart typically tops the list. And that's the nature of non-unionized retail. So, to shift sales around and pirate existing retail sales to create bad jobs with hidden taxpayer costs is not economic development. Thank you.